is Stack, and this is a ball python introduction from A to Z, all the way from selecting your animal and getting your animal through housing, feeding, and long-term care. With the very first thing that you're going to be interested in, and that is acquiring your ball python. Now, of course, you always want to have adoption as your first option. If you can go talk to your local animal shelter, see if they have any of these reptiles, that is obviously a better option than going out and buying them from a breeder or a chain store. If you can't, and it's entirely possible that ball pythons aren't going to be up for adoption, you're going to want to look for a breeder. Breeders generally take better care of their animals than chain pet stores because, again, it's their livelihood and they're a little more well-versed, a little more knowledgeable about their animals. The third option is to, of course, go to a chain store like Petco or PetSmart and purchase your animal there. But when you do this, or you try to adopt your animal or buy your animal anywhere, there's a few key things that you need to ask the salesperson before you pick that animal up. You're going to want to ask your pet store or your breeder is whether or not these animals are domestically bred. Poaching is becoming a real problem in Africa for these animals, and providing a market for those and purchasing animals that have been imported from places like Africa where they're native to it creates a problem. It makes a much higher risk of this species becoming endangered, and of course nobody wants that. So only buy domestically bred animals. The second major point that you want to ask the sales associate is, do you feed your ball pythons frozen mice? This is incredibly important because when they're younger, ball pythons are actually a tad more on the aggressive side than if they're a couple weeks older. And feeding them live mice or live rodents creates a much more aggressive personality type, and they're much, much more likely, I'd say about 4 times more likely to bite you than an animal that has been raised on frozen mice. The second question you want to ask, or the third question you want to ask is, are they fed in their container? The answer to this should be no. Again, you don't want an aggressive animal when you're buying it. You don't want anything that's going to bite you, or if this is for your child, you don't want anything that's going to bite your child. And if the ball pythons are being fed in their container, in their housing situation, they'll be much more likely to bite anything that goes in there, including your hand, because they're used to, when the cage lid is being opened, it's food time. And so you want to make sure they're fed outside their cage and they're being fed frozen rodents. Establish that these prerequisites have been met, the next thing you're going to want to do is physically check the snake yourself. And there's a couple things you want to check for that are common health problems, especially in pet stores where it's common to have several of these snakes living in the same container in close proximity, where disease and parasites are a bit more of a problem. The first thing you're going to want to check for is mites. Now, mites are these tiny little specks that you can see crawling around the mouth and the eyes of a ball python. If you notice any of these, you're going to want to go ahead and tell that associate or tell that breeder that you've noticed mites and you don't want to purchase that animal. That means they haven't been raised properly, that means they're not in a sanitary environment, and you don't want to encourage that kind of lackadaisy behavior. And don't go into this purchase process with the attitude of saving these animals. You're not saving them if you buy one that is in a horrible, horrible condition. It only makes that breeder think that it's an acceptable standard to have these animals treated that way. And every single creature after that that they breed or that they house or that they try to sell will be treated in the same manner because they know they don't have to work any harder for people to purchase these animals. Okay? Check for is whether or not these animals have mouth rot, a respiratory infection, and that their anal spurs are clear. The easiest way to check for mouth rot is to take the lower part of the jaw and just bring it back slightly gently with your thumb and check the gums. If the gums are a nice light pink and they're clean, it's a very healthy snake and it should be okay. If it's darker pink, if it's bubbling, bubbles are the easiest way to check for mouth rot and respiratory infections. Or a white cheesy-like substance coming out the side, you don't want to purchase that animal. Checking for respiratory infections is pretty easy. The first thing you can do is look at the temperature gauges and the humidity gauges inside of the container that they're in. And if they're within the acceptable range, chances are they don't have a respiratory infection. And I'll cover appropriate housing and temperatures in my next video here. The other way you can check for respiratory infection is to actually hold the mouth of the ball python up towards your ear. If you hear a light squeaking and wheezing, kind of like an asthmatic, then they have a respiratory infection, and again, you do not want to purchase that animal. The third thing you need to check for in the physical check is whether or not their anal spurs are clear. This is an indication of proper shedding, good care, and a sanitary environment within the container. And the way you do that is you flip the snake over onto its back, and there will be these two little hooks coming out of the posterior end of the animal, right near the anus. And as long as those are clear, there isn't any debris, you don't see any remaining shedded skin, it's clear and it's okay to purchase that animal. Thing you want to check, it's a really easy little fix, make sure their eyes are clear. If they're all milky, that could mean one of two things. It could either be that they're in the process of shedding, which is perfectly natural, it'll kind of look like a milky blue, but if you notice a lot of retained skin from a previous shed and the head is still covered with that milky dead skin, it's an indication of an improper environment, not proper humidity, not proper temperature, and again, you do not want to purchase that animal. Once you've established that all the snakes are healthy in the particular container you're looking at, the next thing you're going to want to take a look at is personality. Now, you don't want a ball python that is too aggressive or too shy, or you're not going to end up with a very tame snake. The easiest way to do this is to just hold the ball python up in your hand in a nice flat palm, some curled fingers around it, not tight, just let them sit there. And if they're in a normal little position, and the normal position is wrapped around in a ball with their head tucked into their coils, that's a good way to start. It's how they should be when you pick them up. If they gently start to kind of come out of the ball a little bit, explore, flick their tongue at you actively, look around, that's normal behavior for a ball python. If they immediately come out of the cage, they're crawling all over you, it could just be a friendly snake, but chances are it's going to be a bit more of an aggressive personality, and you're going to want to avoid that. Same thing for a shy snake. If it just sits in your hand and it won't come out and it gets tighter and tighter and more tense the longer you hold it, you're going to want to put that one right back. It's not going to make a good companion for you. If you find a snake that is exhibiting the normal behavior, and its tongue is flicking, it's poking its head out a little bit, looking around, smelling you, trying to figure out what's going on, the next thing you want to do is you're going to want to lightly tap its head, bonk it on the nose with a finger, very lightly. And the normal response to this should be a really quick retraction of the head back away from your hand and into the coils. If it exhibits all of these traits, then it is a normal, well-behaved, and probably will be a very easy to tame ball python. Thanks for watching Ball Python Basics A through Z. In my next video, I'm going to be going ahead and covering basic handling procedures for your snake. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button below, leave a comment. I'll get back to you if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.